Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We are just still waiting for a few more people to trickle in here, but we will get things started in just a minute or two. So we will get rolling if you hang tight, but thank you for hopping in to join us. For those of you trickling in right now, we are just giving it another minute here to let some people join, and then we will get started. All right, we know your time is valuable, so we are going to jump in and some more people will join us as we go. Thank you so much for coming out to hear about the Galapagos Islands this afternoon. My name is Erin Correia, and I am with Adventure Life. I am a senior trip planner and Galapagos specialist here, and I am Travel and Leisure's A-list agent for the Galapagos Islands. Adventure Life has been working with the Galapagos Islands for just about 25 years now. And we are joined today by our very special partner in Ecuador, who runs our local partner office there, Betty Jaramillo.
Hi, I'm Betty. I am in Quito, Ecuador. I had been working and creating and coordinating tours for the Galapagos and Ecuador for already 27 years. And of those, 22 years with Adventure Life, the best ones for sure. We're here to completely assist you during your trips 24/7.
Thanks, Betty. So we have found in all these years of coordinating trips to the Galapagos that most travelers tend to have the same questions. And so what we want to do today is tackle some of those most commonly asked questions so that you get a better idea of what's a good starting point when you're planning a trip to the Galapagos Islands. Obviously, we're happy to talk with people more personally about all of these questions, but this gives you a good general idea of what to expect when you're planning a Galapagos trip. You will see there's a little question and answer or a little chat box in the presentation. Feel free to put questions in there throughout the presentation, and we will do a question and answer session at the end. So we will try to address any questions that are asked throughout at the end. And you will receive a recording of this a little bit later on today, along with my direct email address. So any questions that you have, you're also welcome to send those after the presentation. But let's go ahead and jump on in with some of those big questions. So first, where are the Galapagos Islands? The Galapagos Islands are located off the coast of Ecuador. And of course, my presentation is not working as soon as I do this. Let me see if I can hop out of here. Now, give me 1 second here. We'll see if I can get that to load back up. Sorry about that. All right. Let's give this round two here. Let's see if we can get her going. I promise we tested this right before we hopped on here, and yet here we are. All right. Hopefully this is going to do better for us. So Galapagos Islands, there we go. They are located in South America. They are right off the coast of Ecuador. So to get there, you're going to fly down to Ecuador, and then you take a flight about 2.5 hours by jet, large jets, out to the Galapagos Islands located out here in the Pacific. The Galapagos Islands sit right on the equator. And this is a better shot of the islands, and you can kind of see the wildlife spread throughout the islands here. There are two more islands that sit north of here, Wolf and Darwin Island. Those are only visited as part of dive trips, though. So these are the islands we're going to focus on, the main tourist islands that you can see when visiting the Galapagos. As you can see here, there are some darker sections of the map and then some lighter sections. These darker sections are the populated areas of the Galapagos. These are where the little towns are, and these are the only places you are allowed to visit in the Galapagos National Park without a guide. So you can see that located here, these dark sections of the map. There we go. Sorry, technical difficulties. We're on track. So these tiny little dark sections, those are the only places that you can visit without a guide. The rest is all protected national park. And so you do have to have a guide with you when you visit any other area in the Galapagos Islands. Now, that is why independent travel to the Galapagos Islands is not super common. Most people book a pre-planned trip because you want to be able to visit more than just those darker gray sections there. So we are here to help you do that. One of the big questions people like to ask is, when should I go to the Galapagos Islands? As we saw on the map, they're located right on the equator, which means they're pretty great to visit year-round. There aren't huge seasonal variations, and so you could really go any time of year and have a fantastic experience. Now, that being said, there are some slight fluctuations throughout the year. December through May is the hottest time of year. It's when you have the most sun. It's also when you get some of those big, heavy rain showers. So we like to describe it sort of like those Florida afternoon rain showers. You're going to have hot sun throughout the day, but then some big, heavy, wet rain followed by more sun. So it does get the most rainfall by inch at this time of year, but also has the sunniest skies at this time of year. It's also the time of year when you have the least wind and the calmest seas. So for people with motion sickness issues, going December through May can be really ideal. Because of those heavy rains, the scenery does tend to be a little more lush and green at that time of year. Then, as you head into the June through November time period, things cool off a little bit, not drastically. It tends to be more overcast, and this is the season when the mists roll in. So even though you're getting less rainfall by inch at this time of year, you do tend to have a little more wetness throughout the day. Those light mists are in the air. This is also when the Humboldt currents come in. These are some cold water currents that flow through the Galapagos during this time of year, and they bring in lots of nutrients in the water. This can be really nice because the marine life is super active at this time of year. They're all on a feeding frenzy, enjoying all of that nutrient-rich water. But those currents also bring in rougher seas. So the water's colder and a little bit rougher, which makes this a little less ideal for people who suffer from motion sickness. Because there aren't heavy rainfalls, you also see less greenery at this time of year. You still see some in the highlands, but this is actually the same island, just at two different times of year. This is during the wet season, and this is during the dry season. You get a little more of a post-apocalyptic feeling as you're making your way through the islands during this season. You can see here some of those fluctuations. So you can see the temperatures, they're going to peak right around March in the high 80s, but the coldest is only going to be in the mid 70s in August. So not a big range there. The same thing with those lows, you're only dropping down to the upper 60s in the coldest season and the lower 70s in the hot season. You can see that big difference in the rainfall here, a lot more during this time of year than here, but even then, it's still not anything extreme. You're usually not having all-day rains. You do get those sunnier skies and those warmer sea temperatures this time of year. Now you can see when those Humboldt currents hit, that's where you get that big dip. Otherwise, the water's pretty consistent throughout the year. I hate cold water. I've been at this time of year. Snorkeling is still possible with a wetsuit, and it's really fantastic snorkeling. So even though it's a little chilly, definitely worth getting in the water at this time of year. And then you can see again those wind forces. You know, March, you've got hot temperatures, the sunny skies, the heavy rainfalls, and the really calm seas versus over here in September when you're getting colder, mistier, and you're going to have the higher winds. So you do have more rocking on boats, a little more motion sickness for people who suffer from that. There are three main ways to visit the Galapagos Islands. The first is to do a single hotel stay. With a single hotel stay, you're typically going to fly into Baltra. From Baltra, you're going to take a little bus from the airport, about 5 minutes to the ferry port. You take a quick little ferry across this channel here, and you come over to Santa Cruz Island. Santa Cruz is kind of the main island for the Galapagos. And then you take a vehicle across the island, across the highlands, and down to the port town of Puerto Ayora. This is where most hotels are located. This is going to be the starting point for most day trips in the Galapagos Islands. And so you're really focusing on Santa Cruz when you do a single hotel stay. With a single hotel stay, you then can explore Santa Cruz more in depth, and you could take day trips out to the islands surrounding Santa Cruz. So really you can kind of see this area of the Galapagos Islands when you do a single day tour. Now, the pros to this, you have a little more flexibility. You're staying in one hotel, you could choose, I want to have some down days, I want to have some active days. I want to go out and do day trips to islands 1 or 2 days, and I want to stay here and kayak one day. So you have some flexibility in how you plan your stay. You have more free time. You can choose to just have a down day and enjoy the port town, enjoying the local restaurants, do some souvenir shopping, relax by the pool. That's not possible with a lot of the other styles of trips. So you get that with the single hotel stay. And for a lot of people, they don't want to sleep on a boat. So this is a great way to do that. You can stay in a hotel in Puerto Ayora for your entire stay. Cons, motion sickness. Now that seems like it shouldn't matter when you're staying in a hotel, but the fact is when you're taking day trips out to these other islands, you are on a little boat for 1 to 2 hours in each direction, getting to these different sites to see them. So it's 1 to 2 hours getting there and another 1 to 2 hours getting back. With these little boats, you don't have your own private cabin. You don't have your own private bathroom if you're feeling sick. You don't have a place to lay down. You're kind of stuck oftentimes inside as you make those crossings, and they're going fast, so they can be fairly rough. So motion sickness can be an issue on those day trips. In fact, I've heard it's a lot worse for most travelers on those day trips than it is on a cruise. You have a little less variety because you are just seeing these central islands. You can't get out to see the scenery and the wildlife that you get at these outlying islands. And the con is you have the most wasted time in your day. As you are taking those day trips out and back from these islands, those are prime daytime hours. You're not doing that in the dark. You're not doing that over meal times. You are doing those during daytime hours when you could be seeing and doing other things. So you lose anywhere from 2 to 4 hours in transit as you go to explore other islands. So you do have the most wasted time when you're on these. The island hopping is another version of a trip that you can do. With island hopping tours, you are going to focus on the 3 main islands here: Santa Cruz, San Cristobal, and Isabela. With these 3 main islands, what you could do is fly in from mainland Ecuador into San Cristobal or into Baltra. And then there are hotels on these 3 islands, and you get between these. I'll talk about that a little more, but by ferry boat or by flight. And so then you can choose to stay on 2 islands. You could choose to stay on 3 islands. But really what you're going to do is focus just on these islands during your stay. So as you come in, you are just seeing these 3 main areas. One of our most popular trips is actually our Galapagos multi-sport trip. And with the Galapagos multi-sport trip, we have you fly into San Cristobal, you do some great exploration here, hiking, kayaking, snorkeling. Then you take a little hopper plane to fly over to Isabela. Here you do some more, you do a great volcano hike, you get to bike to the Wall of Tears, you get to see some fantastic wildlife through snorkeling, and then you take a little hopper flight back over to Baltra and come down to Puerto Ayora to finish up your trip, flying back to the mainland from here. So you don't have to do any backtracking. You could see some great things when you do this. Now, pros of this, you have the least amount of time spent traveling during your trip. Rather than having to spend a couple of hours going back and forth to see different sites, you just have a quick hopper flight here, a quick hopper flight there, or you could take a ferry to get between those islands. So really, you have the most time spent doing things and the least time spent traveling out of any style of trip. You have the least possibility for motion sickness because you're not taking long transits by boat. If you take the ferries between the islands, you definitely have the risk of motion sickness. We try to avoid that and plan most of our trips utilizing those small hopper flights instead. And you have the most flexibility. Do you want to camp for a couple of nights? Do you want to kayak? Do you want to take surfing lessons? Do you want to bike? Do you want to hike? Do you want a pool day in there? We can do all of that in these island hopping trips very easily. And you get some nice variety because you have the different activities on those different 3 islands. Now, the cons, you get the least variety of the sites that you see. Now, that being said, while you get the least variety of landscapes between these 3 islands and not getting out to all these other outlying islands, you do have fantastic wildlife on these 3 islands. So the quintessential wildlife most people are hoping to see, you still get to knock that out just on these 3 islands alone. So you still get fantastic wildlife. You just don't see quite as many different landscapes by not hitting any of these other islands. And the final way to see the Galapagos Islands is definitely the most common, and that's through a cruise. Cruises are fantastic because it allows you to really get out there and see as much as possible during your stay. They are the most efficient way to visit the islands. You get to the islands, you get on your boat, and that afternoon you are off exploring. They are going to do most of the sailing between islands while you're eating and while you're sleeping. So those prime daytime hours when you want to be out there exploring, you get to explore. You're going to be spending your full morning and your full afternoon off the ship pretty much every day. And you get a really good variety of activities, a really good variety of wildlife, and a really good variety of scenery as you do this. Now, I will put the disclaimer out there that I hate being on a boat. I hate cruising. I hate being on a boat. I'm not a fan of that style of travel. But for the Galapagos Islands, I love it. It is absolutely my first choice every time I go down. And even with the terrible motion sickness that I tend to have, I'm able to handle it with medication really easily. So for me, even though I'd prefer not to be on a boat, I almost always choose that when visiting the Galapagos Islands because of the efficiency, because of the variety you get to see, and because of the value. You're really making the most of every minute in the islands, so you get the most for your money there. You're not worrying about where you're going to eat. Your meals are all included on the ship. You're not worrying about what you're going to see or what you're going to do. The guides have you taken care of. So the cruises really have a lot of pros. Cons, obviously, motion sickness. You're going to be sleeping on a boat. You're going to be eating on a boat. So that can be a struggle. Like I said, I manage it with medication and have been just fine for all of my trips, but everybody's different. So a cruise may not be for everyone. You definitely have the least flexibility on a cruise. That itinerary is planned. It is planned between the ship and the national park years in advance, and you get no say in it. Every once in a while, they'll have a choice of activities like, oh, we have the option of kayaking or stand-up paddleboarding, or you have the option of remaining on board. But you don't have a big menu of activities to choose from every day. You really have what is planned by the cruise for that day. And you have the least free time. Some of the cruises do try to get you into a port town and give you a little bit of free time to do some souvenir shopping, but that's not true on all of them. So that's definitely something, if that's important to you, that we'd want to look for in an itinerary. But overall, you're really going to be utilizing all of your time when you're on a cruise, so you don't have a lot of downtime when you're doing those. With the cruises, you will fly into either Baltra or San Cristobal, and the cruises embark either in Baltra, Puerto Ayora, or San Cristobal. So with San Cristobal and Baltra, if you're embarking there, you fly in, head right to the ship, and head right out on your first afternoon exploration. If your ship embarks in Puerto Ayora, usually you're going to do a little excursion as you're making your way across Santa Cruz to get to your ship, and then you set out on afternoon explorations. But either option is going to be fantastic. The ships usually try to use both airports when they can to make things really efficient. And so flying into these, the cruise will take it from there. They'll bring you back to one of these airports at the end of your stay, and you fly back out to mainland Ecuador from there. Now, with these 3 options, we saw what you could see with the single hotel, really focusing around Puerto Ayora. With the island hopping, the 3 main islands. With the cruises, with all of those, you kind of have a variety of hotels, but not a huge range. You've got some slightly more budget friendly, some a little more luxurious. With the Galapagos ships, there are dozens of ships in the island. And so you have a wide range of ships to choose from. These can fit all different budget points. We really like to break them down into 3 different classes when we're comparing ships. So we've got the super budget class here. You can see this is definitely for, I want a more affordable trip in the Galapagos Islands. So it's usually going to be smaller 16 passenger ships that are in this price point. They're going to have bunk bed style beds, small cabins. You still do have this private cabin with your own private bathroom. They do still all have air conditioning on board. They do still have all 3 meals a day, but it is going to be much more simple in this budget class. You've got Really, like I said, the small cabins, the lounge areas are going to be pretty basic and pretty simple, but you still have all the necessities that you need. You've got good food, you've got a clean place to stay, and you've got a great guide. You move up from that into first class. The cabins get bigger, the cabins get nicer, the lounges get nicer, and the meals get nicer. So really, it's that onboard experience that you see elevated when you move up in class of ships. There are probably the most ships in the Galapagos that fall into this class of ships. So quite a few to choose from here. And then you move up to the luxury class. With luxury class, again, you're seeing the cabins get bigger. A lot of them are going to have balconies. You see jacuzzis on board most of them. Much nicer deck areas, much nicer lounges, and much more gourmet style meals on board these ships. Now, the one thing to keep in mind, though, when you're comparing these different budget points is that they're all going to have trained naturalist guides. They're all going to have the same access to the islands. They are all going to have the same types of opportunities to explore. So you're not getting better wildlife because you're on a luxury ship. You're just getting better accommodations and better food on board. So really, it comes down to where you're most comfortable staying and the type of food you like to eat when you're choosing the class of ship that you want to go with. Now, the ships in the Galapagos Islands do range from about 14 to 16 passengers, all the way up to 100. 100 passengers is the largest size allowed in the Galapagos Islands. The majority of the ships are going to fall in that 16 to 20 passenger range. The reason for this, in the Galapagos Islands, there's actually a law that you cannot have more than 16 people per guide as you're exploring. So most of the ships hold 16 passengers and employ one guide at a time. That way, everyone can go out together, everyone's with that guide, it keeps things really simple. When you get up into the higher numbers of passengers, they have more guides on board. So you're divided up into smaller groups as you go ashore with your guide. You're all still going ashore typically at the same time, but you're just broken down into smaller groups as you do that. So small ships versus large ships. With the small ships, you tend to get a little more camaraderie on board. Everyone gets to know each other throughout the cruise. You tend to kind of become friends with everybody. It's all one big kind of crazy family with shared stories by the end. You get smaller crowds. Now I say ish, because while you may be on a small ship that is going ashore, the national park is going to try to maximize out their permits for every landing site every day. This is their way of making sure everything is protected and everything is really evenly spread. So if you're on a small 16 passenger ship, you might be one of 3 or 4 ships that utilize that landing site that day. So you will never feel like you're in a big crowd when you go ashore. They manage it really well, but you may see some other travelers in the distance and see some other boats. Versus if you're on a large ship, you might be the only ship utilizing that space that day. So it could work out to be about the same number of people at the landing sites. With the small ships, it definitely is more efficient loading and unloading. So you only have to get 16 people on and off the ship at a landing site. That goes really quickly and really smoothly when you're on a small ship because there are so few people that have to move. And another pro is that you feel close to the water. So when you're on that small ship, your windows in your cabin are right there by the water level. The decks on the ship aren't far above the water level. So if there happens to be a whole pot of sea turtles floating by or dolphins, though those are rare, or some sea lions putting on a good show, you're right there looking out at them and you're not far from them. Versus on a large ship, you're going to be further away from the water and further away from the activity in the water. Now, the cons to the small ships, obviously, smaller ship is going to be less stable on the water. So you do usually feel that movement a bit more. You are going to feel movement in the Galapagos even during the calm water season. So you want to be prepared for that. And you feel it more on a small ship than you do on a large ship. You have a little less anonymity. So if you are a person who likes to keep to yourself and have a more private experience and not become friends with everyone else on board, you have more of an opportunity to do that on the large ships than you do on the small. On the small, everyone kind of knows everything about everyone else. You don't come to breakfast, everyone's checking on you. Are you feeling okay? Are you ready to go today? So you have a little less anonymity if that's something you're looking for. And I put this on here, you get a little less escape from annoying travelers. So, you might have that one person on the trip that you just don't click with personality-wise. You're not really going to escape them on a small ship. So you just kind of have to learn to love everybody when you go on those small ship experiences. Large ship, obviously more stability because you are going to be on that larger ship on the water. I say more space ish again, because while you do have more lounges and you do have larger dining rooms, you are sharing that space with more people. So it really comes out to about the same amount of space per person that you get on the small ships. You do have more anonymity if you're looking for that in an experience. The cons, if you want that camaraderie, you're not getting it. It's a little less personal. You do have more people-ish, again, at those landing sites. Like we said, you may still have a few other ships rolling in with the small ships, but you know you're always going to have 100 people going ashore when you're on a 100-person ship. So you do see more people overall on a large ship than you do on a small ship. And it is going to be a little less efficient as far as loading and unloading goes. When you have to get 100 people off, it's going to take a little bit longer. That being said, the ships manage it really well. They've been doing this for a long time. And so they are going to try to speed through that as quickly as they can, and you won't feel like you're waiting for a really long time. But it is a little longer than it is on a small ship. We do work with the large ships. There are less of them in the islands. There are only a few really large ships, but you'll notice some of the big names. Celebrity is there, National Geographic is there, Silver Sea is there. There are definitely some pros and cons to using the big names. Personally, I really love a lot of the local companies, but it all comes down to what you're looking to get out of that experience. And so that comes down to us helping you play matchmaker to find the right ship. The Galapagos Cruises, while we saw you could only visit, these 3 islands with the island hopping, you're really only visiting this area with the single island. The cruises tend to hit all of these areas in a 15-day period. So most of the ships have worked out with the national park a 15-day itinerary. So they are making a big loop that hits just about every landing site in 15 days. Now, obviously, most travelers can't dedicate 15 days to the Galapagos Islands. So what they have done is they take that itinerary and they split it into 2 for most of the ships. And so they may, for the first 8 days of that, come around here and visit these islands. And then for the second 8 days, come around here and visit these islands. Or they might do the north for the first 8 days and the south for the second 8 days. Some of them then take those 8-day cruises and break those down even more into short cruises. So for the first 5 days of that, they may make their way coming around here and coming over to the San Cristobal airport. They'll trade out passengers on that middle day of the cruise. And then for the next 4 days, they're going to come down and hit these southern islands and loop back up here. So really, you can hit half of the islands, typically in an 8-day cruise, a quarter of the sites in a 4 or 5 day cruise. 6 day, there's a couple that do 6-day cruises and 7-day cruises, which give you a little more spread in there. But you're usually hitting just a section of the islands unless you can commit to that full 15-day cruise. So that brings up the biggest question people have for the Galapagos Islands, and that is, what is the best place to visit? Which of those sections should I be going to? Well, as you can see on that map, the wildlife is really well spread out in the islands. You are getting those quintessential creatures just about everywhere you go. I have done the north, I've done the south, I've done the east, I've done the west, and I can truly say they are all equally fantastic. My first trip was to the south, and I thought, that's it. Nothing on earth can compare to this. There is no way you could get a better experience than what I just had as I visited the Galapagos Islands. And then my next trip was to the west. And, oh, hey, look at that. It is equally fantastic. And I really couldn't pick a favorite between the 2 now. I went back to the south and had a completely different experience than I did the first time. Equally fantastic, but totally different wildlife experiences. The first time I was here, I saw 1 sea turtle. I saw a dozen on the west and thought, oh, there must be more on the west. Came back and saw several dozen the next time I was in the south. So it really can vary. Every time is going to be a little bit different that you visit the islands, and every area of the islands is truly equally fantastic. Now, that being said, people have different preferences. And if there are certain creatures that you are really hoping to encounter, obviously we can't make guarantees in the Galapagos, but what our job is to learn what your priorities are, learn what your goals are. And if you do have that specific creature you're hoping to see, we're going to listen for that. And we are going to find the itinerary that's going to give you the best chance of seeing that creature. Because while any itinerary will give you that quintessential Galapagos experience and give you some really fantastic wildlife, there are some creatures that you can only see in specific spots. For instance, The waved albatross is on some people's list. We can only see that at Espanola Island and only at certain times of year. So we want to be really specific if someone is looking for that creature. The flightless cormorant. This can only be found at Fernandina and Isabella in the far west. The penguin, my personal favorite. These every once in a while will pop up in random places that you're not expecting them. But for the best chances, we want to get you to Isabella, Fernandina, or Bartolome, or an itinerary that combines all three of them if you're really a penguin nut like I am. So we know where you have the best chances of spotting these, and we can help you find the itinerary that's best going to match that. Galapagos tortoises. Even though the islands are named after the tortoise, not every itinerary is going to have a chance to see them. So if tortoises are important to you when you go, we definitely want to know that, and we want to help you find the best way to see them. If you're looking to see them, something like this, where you're out seeing them in the wild, that's going to happen in the highlands of Santa Cruz, the highlands of Isabella, and the highlands of San Cristobal. So highlands is really the key word there. That's where they like to be, in that lush green landscape. Then there are the breeding centers. The breeding centers is where tortoises are brought to help bring back populations on some of the islands that their populations are starting to dwindle. So they've started breeding programs, and here you can see the adults that have been brought to breed, and then you can see all the little tortoises at their different stages of development. Those can be found at the Charles Darwin Station, that is on Santa Cruz Island, and the Isabella Breeding Station on Isabella Island. So these are some of the creatures that, if you're really specifically looking for these, we're going to want to be more particular about the itinerary we pick for you. But if you're just looking for that quintessential Galapagos experience, it truly is hard to go wrong in the islands. So that brings up a big question. Why book with Adventure Life instead of directly with a ship? And what I've been saying is really one of the big reasons for that: honest matchmaking. If you call a ship company directly, or a company that just works with a couple of ships, they are going to try to convince you why those ships and their itineraries are going to be the best match for you. We work with every reputable ship in the Galapagos Islands. We don't have bias towards one over another. We are going to listen to what your goals are for the trip, and we are going to find the best cruise or land tour for you. I don't have an agenda when you call me to talk about a Galapagos trip. I just want to make sure you are going to have the best experience possible for you. And so that's what we're here to do that honest matchmaking with you. You also get equal pricing when you book with us. So it's very strict in the Galapagos Islands, especially with those cruises, that they set their rates and everyone has to sell the cruise for the same rate. So whether you book with Adventure Life, or you book directly with the ship, or you book with some random sketchy discount site online, everyone should be offering the exact same prices. If someone isn't, you should be leery of that. So you get that equal pricing, but you get the extra support then when you're booking with someone like us for no extra cost. We also have buying power. So we work with these ships. We send thousands of travelers to the Galapagos Islands every year. And when we do that, the ships get to know us and they know our company. So if something goes wrong, if a cruise has to be canceled for some reason, there's a mechanical issue, if they need to move people to another ship for some reason, we have more power to handle those problems for you. If you've booked directly with the ship and something goes wrong, they're not as worried about upsetting you because you're just one person. But if they upset us, it could affect hundreds of decisions we make over the next year in choosing to send travelers to them. So we have more power. The ships want to keep us happy, and so they work with us to find the best possible solutions, and we are their first priority when they're doing that. So when you book with us, you get that buying power with the ships. You also have 24-hour support while traveling. We have an emergency line that is here to help you throughout the entire trip, both our international line and a line directly to Betty's office while you are in Ecuador. And so you are taken care of 24 hours. We are going to help you with packing lists. We're going to help you with the documents you need, everything you need to know to get yourself out to the islands and have a fantastic experience. We are providing all of that support versus just booking the cruise direct with the ship, who is really just going to give you the cruise information. And finally, we can help you create a more comprehensive experience. So if you have extra time and you want to expand your trip beyond the Galapagos Islands, we can absolutely do that for you. We can help. You have to get to the Galapagos or to Ecuador a couple of days before you head to the Galapagos. You really, the way the international flights work, you could get there one day before you head to the islands, but it's a little risky with airlines and all of their delays lately. So we typically recommend that you arrive a minimum of 2 nights before you head out to the islands. And so then we're there to help with hotels, transfers, sightseeing, awesome things to do to make the most of your time. But we can also help expand your trip beyond that time. And so that is where Betty comes in to talk to you a little bit here about how you can incorporate more of Ecuador into your trip.
Thank you, Erin. Thanks for all the presentation about the beautiful Galapagos. When you go to Galapagos, you have to consider that you can fly from either Quito or Guayaquil in mainland Ecuador. Our country is located in the tropical area, crossed by the equator line, crossed by the Amazon, by the Andes. So it gives us 4 regions. We have the archipelago of the Galapagos, the coast, Andes, and Amazon basin. And because all these ups and downs, we have microclimates. For example, we can have the cloud forest, or you can have a permanent snow over the mountains in the Cotopaxi, that is the highest active volcano of the world. I would like to talk about some facts of our country. Next, please. Thank you. Our country is the first one that recognized the rights of nature in the world. We have 84 volcanoes, 27 of them are active. We have some that have eruptions around now. We have more than 100 species of hummingbirds. We are considered the capital of the world for orchids and for birds because of the amount we have, even endemic ones. Our country has a lot of culture. You have to consider that Ecuador was part of the Inca Empire. And even before that, we have a lot of cultures from Ecuador. The Constitution recognized our country as multicultural and plurilinguistic. We have 5 different sites that are declared by the UNESCO World Heritage Sites. That's some of the things that we can share with you. Next, please. And what I've seen is that many times clients come to the Galapagos, and when they arrive, they feel the weather, they see the mountains, and they say they really regret why they didn't book an extension to go to the Cotopaxi or go to see the cultures, experience the food. There are so many things you can see and do and taste to make an experience in Ecuador complete. And we are here to help you putting all the pieces together, because Ecuador, I can tell you for sure, has everything for everyone, and we are here to help you.
So that was a lot of information that we threw at you really fast there. And of course, we are here to help with questions and to answer more things personally, but we did see some different questions pop up here during. So let me see if we could take a peek here at some of those and get those answered for you. All right, so definitely safety. We're seeing a lot of questions about safety, and that is a great question.
So I can help you.
Perfect, Betty. I was saying Galapagos Island safety is not a concern at all, but you have probably heard in the news some safety concerns in mainland Ecuador, in Guayaquil and in Quito. So Betty, if you want to address those.
Yes, as Jane said, well, Galapagos, point apart, there's nothing at all in the Galapagos, everything clear. But in mainland Ecuador, yes, we should say that there had been escalating in some bad areas, but we must tell you that it is concentrated in some areas of the country. In Quito, for example, we must say that it is the safety will be similar to the same safety situation in any big city in the world. And the news that you heard maybe it's because political targets that have been making us sad. All the country is really sad for all that happened. But in general, tours are running smoothly. Our clients are traveling currently around the country without any issue. And the most important thing is we are here to help you, to go with you and to take you to places where you are not in risk. So you can count with our expertise for that.
Definitely. We do most things guided in mainland Ecuador. We're putting you in safe places. We've really carefully scouted the places that we have you. And your guides are fantastic at making sure you know where you can go, where you can't, and where you should be with a guide. So we definitely make that top priority while you're traveling.
Yeah. definitely.
Someone was asking about pairing a cruise with a land-based trip. That's a really great question. Absolutely, it is possible. It's not my favorite. And the reason it's not my favorite is because, one, if you're going to do a short cruise, a lot of times it's going to stay right around those central islands. And those are the only areas you can then visit when you're doing day trips. So there's a lot of overlap of the areas you can see. Two, the day that you get off the cruise and then start your land trip really ends up being kind of a lost day for you because you're getting to that island and your hotel too late in the day to be able to do excursions that same day typically. And you're not really getting much on your cruise. So you're paying for that last day of the cruise, paying for the first day of your land trip, and not really getting a whole lot out of that combination. I do like the combination if you're looking for just a little bit of downtime. I've definitely done a cruise and then stayed a couple of nights in a port town to relax, to try the local restaurants, to do some souvenir shopping, and to know it would just be kind of a down day. But if you're doing the combination to try to expand on your experience, it's not great for that. You would get a lot more value for your money by staying on the ship a couple of more days. And you tend to pay less per day as the cruise gets longer. So you get more value doing an extended cruise over extending on land. But it definitely is possible. I understand ships are not for everyone. Someone asked if the ships have exercise areas. Some of them do, mostly larger ones, but there are a couple of small luxury ships that have them as well. But I will say most guests find they don't use them. The reason for that, I should share, like on a cruise, a typical day is you're going to get up really early in the morning, usually 6:30, 7 in the morning, have breakfast on board the boat, and then you are heading out for a full morning of excursions. It's either going to be one longer excursion, something like a long wildlife walk where you're hiking during all of that, or they'll break it up and you might have a wildlife walk and a snorkeling trip, or a wildlife walk and a Zodiac cruise. And then you're coming back to the boat, having lunch, have a tiny bit of downtime as they're motoring to the next spot sometimes, and then you're out for that full afternoon again. So again, it might be a combination of a wildlife walk and some snorkeling, or a longer snorkeling trip, or a longer wildlife walk, or some kayaking and a snorkeling trip. And then you're coming back onto the boat, usually in the early evening. That's the time of day most people shower up for the day, get cleaned up. You come have a meeting to talk about the next day and get prepared for that. And then you have dinner. And so you're finishing dinner around usually 8 o'clock at night, and you're beat from the day. Snorkeling in those currents and in that water usually does kind of take it out of you. So even when I've been on the ships that do have the exercise rooms on board, they usually stay empty for most of the time. But if that is a priority, if it's something where you really need to get in your daily jog or work with weights, we could definitely help you find a ship that does have that. Let's see. Sea turtles. Sea turtles can be found there throughout the year. So there are a couple of different times that they can be nesting. So there isn't really one time of year that's going to be the best time. I've seen them on all of my trips down there. And I've gone at various times of year. So it would depend kind of on the area you're going to be going to and the time of year for that area. So we could help you find an itinerary where you have a better chance of seeing them depending on when you're looking to travel. But there isn't this is the month you have to travel to see sea turtles. How far in advance do you recommend making reservations? Great question. Man, 3 years ago, I could have told you like science. This is when you should make your reservation. And for this month, you should plan this many months in advance. This month, you should plan this many months in advance. COVID has thrown everything out of whack. And so the predictability of it is starting to come back, but we're not quite there yet. If you're looking to travel over Christmas or New Year's, usually the further in advance you can plan, the better. A lot of the ships charter out for that time of year where people book the entire ship. And so the options are more limited at that time of year. We do have some charter spaces still open for Christmas. So if you're looking to travel at the holidays this year, let us know. But definitely for the holidays, try to plan as far as in advance as you can. The same thing goes for peak times that kids are out of school. So spring break season, February through April, really tends to book up, I would say 6 to 9 months in advance. You start to see options dwindling. You can definitely book closer to than that, but you'll have fewer options. Summer months, again, book out a little bit further if you can. 6 to 9 months is really ideal. Fall tends to be a little bit slower for the islands, so you can usually wait a little bit longer to book for the fall. But definitely, I think unless you're planning for holidays, anywhere from 6 months to a year is really ideal to get your best choice of options. Most economical time to visit without compromising weather, wildlife sightings. Good question. The prices tend to be the same year round, except for Christmas and New Year's. A lot of the ships do charge much higher prices over the holidays at the end of the year. But aside from that, have the same pricing year round. We do sometimes see fall specials. So if you're looking for a discount, the first couple weeks of January, when you're post-holidays, or I'd say like maybe the second 2 weeks of January, post-holidays, pre-spring break, we sometimes see some discounts in there. Fall is usually a time to get discounts, but it is going to be cooler. You are going to have the rougher waters at that time of year. Kids are back in school though, so it's also a good time to go if you don't want to be around children while you're traveling. Always a chance of kids there, but that's the best time of year if you want to try to avoid them as best as possible. So economically, really just avoiding the holidays is the biggest thing. If you don't mind the cooler weather, possibly in the fall as well. I already booked a cruise. What type of water shoes do you recommend? Good question. So for any of the snorkeling trips, they're going to have flippers for you. So you're going to wear those as you're snorkeling. Getting on and off the boat, having some sturdy water sandals or some slip-on water shoes is really nice. I use Chacos. I know Tevas, Keens, things like that are like a sporty water sandal are really helpful. Some people, though, just choose for those wet landings. They'll always let you know we're going to get on shore at a dry spot or at a wet spot. Some people just bring their sneakers, their tennis shoes, carry them as they get out of the water, wade to shore, dry off their feet, and put their tennis shoes on. So you don't have to have water shoes for the trip, but I do think they're handy. And I would say like a sturdy bottom shoe is most comfortable for walking on rocks. Let's see. Yeah, I see some questions in there about Antarctica. We can help you with that too. Don't worry. It is my second favorite place on the planet compared to the Galapagos Islands. What about wetsuits for snorkeling? Do I get one? Are they available? It's going to depend on the ship that you're on. Almost every ship will have wetsuits available for rent on board. Some of the more expensive, more luxurious ships include those in the cost. So they're typically going to be available there. Whether they're included or you have to pay for them locally will depend on the ship that you're choosing. And that's something we would let you know as you're looking at those options and as you're getting ready for your trip. For the land-based trips, we can help you get those rented locally. For any of the snorkeling or things like that for the land-based trips. And for our multi-sport trip, we usually help you get those there as well. So yes, wetsuits, definitely. I don't get in the water in the Galapagos without them. I'm a wimp. I hate cold water. I wear them absolutely every time I get in the water there. Best person to email with questions. It looks like Emily answered that. You'll get my contact information today via email. So feel free to shoot me an email. I'm definitely happy to help with questions you have there. Diving in the Galapagos. That is its own big topic that we could talk about forever. Yes, you can dive in the islands. The currents are strong. And so it's not a great place for beginner divers. You're not going to get to see much that's better than the snorkeling if you're a beginner diver. Each of the different sites in the Galapagos does have a minimum number of dives required. There are some for basic beginners, but like I said, you won't see much more than you would snorkeling. Some of the dive sites are really fantastic, but they're going to require some good experience. 25 log submersions, 50 log submersions. You can either do diving from a land-based trip, or there are live-aboard dive-focused cruises. Those are typically going to take you up to the Wolf and Darwin Islands that weren't on the map that I showed. And those are going to be really dive-focused trips where you only go on shore a few times. Most of your excursions will be diving. Some of the tourist cruises can arrange a dive. So if that's something that's important to you, you would need to talk to us and we'd have to look for a cruise specifically that can do that. Sometimes they'll have a minimum number of participants. And when you're doing that dive, you are missing the other activities that people are doing on the cruise that day as a dive company comes, picks you up, takes you out for a dive and brings you back. So it's not fantastic if you're going to be doing a cruise. It's better usually if you're doing a full live aboard or doing a land-based trip where we work in some diving. Amazon tours, absolutely we can combine the Amazon with the Galapagos. It's a great combination. If availability and your schedule works out, we do recommend trying to see the Amazon before seeing the Galapagos. We like to joke that in the Amazon, you go looking for wildlife, while in the Galapagos, the wildlife comes looking for you. And so if you go in with the right expectations, it can still be fantastic after the Galapagos. But the Galapagos is just so beyond compare and so epic. It's the type of place I thought people were exaggerating and lying about until I saw it for myself. It is hard to follow anything directly after Galapagos. So I always encourage people, do your Ecuador exploration, do your Amazon exploration, and then finish your trip with the Galapagos because it's just such a high point. It's great to end on it. Dietary accommodations. If you're going to be on a cruise, absolutely, those can be accommodated. We would just ask that you let us know in advance. If it's super, super strict, such as a kosher diet, it's going to be a little trickier. There are only maybe 1 or 2 ships that can actually accommodate that. That is a tricky one. But vegetarian, gluten-free, vegan's a little tricky, but they can definitely do it. And what we would do is when you fill out your forms for us, we'll ask you in advance what your dietary restrictions are, and we'll let the ship know so that they can be prepared for that. And the more luxurious ships, the more you're paying for the ship, they're going to have more options. You'll have probably less options the more strict your diet is on the budget ships, but they can all definitely accommodate restrictions. Let's see, Galapagos with Machu Picchu. Yes, we can definitely combine Machu Picchu with the Galapagos. Again, just like the Amazon, I really love to have travelers, if they're going to do that combination, go to Machu Picchu first and then finish with the Galapagos, unless you're someone who is more of a history buff than a wildlife buff, in which case Machu Picchu might be the combination for you. But absolutely, it's a combination we create all the time, and we can definitely do that for you. Educational presentations on the ship. So, or at the hotels. That is a great question. So you do have, when you're doing a cruise, the naturalist guide is accompanying the whole trip. So they're going to talk to you at night. They're doing those presentations before dinner where they recap the day. They talk to you more about what you saw, give more information about it, prepare you for the next day with some educational information. And then all of your excursions are totally educational. I don't mean that it sounds like a lecture sort of way, but you are constantly learning as you go in the Galapagos. So it is a fully educational experience on those cruises. On the land-based trips, they're usually not going to be doing presentations at the hotels, but your guide that you are out with exploring during the day is going to be teaching you about everything you're seeing and doing. On those cruises, the guides are also just kind of part of the group throughout the day. So they're usually sitting with you for meals, hanging out in the lounges, and so you can always chat them up with questions outside of those presentations too. Zodiacs are used for all trips in the Galapagos. You really can't go to the Galapagos and see anything without taking a Zodiac. No ships can actually dock at any of the islands. So there are no piers where ships can dock in the Galapagos. You do have to load onto those small Zodiacs to go to and from the ships if you're on a ship, or if you're doing day tours, you're going to use those Zodiacs to go out snorkeling. You're going to use the Zodiacs to get to the day tour boats. So really, it's hard to go to the Galapagos and avoid a Zodiac. That is going to be utilized for most transportation. Accommodations for physical limitations. So Galapagos can be a little bit tricky. You absolutely could go on a cruise and stay on the boat and see some cool things from the boat. But for most of the landings, you are going to need to be able to walk on unsteady ground for an hour or two at a time. I have been on cruises where there were people in their 80s who had some walking limitations, and the guide was just really good and honest with them about saying, okay, this excursion I think is going to be a little tricky for you. You might want to sit this one out. Or we have walking sticks, and you're definitely going to want to take those for this excursion. So the guides are really good about letting you know what's possible and what's not at each of the landing sites. But for the most part, the Galapagos isn't going to be super friendly and for people that have physical limitations. Like I said, if you're happy seeing it from the boat, absolutely it's possible. But the getting ashore, it's not paved paths. It is all walking over sand, walking over rocks. So definitely you want to be steady on your feet when you go to the Galapagos. Oh goodness, let's see. Bugs, do we need repellent? Bugs aren't super common in the Galapagos. They're really good. You'll go through an inspection process. The planes are going to get sprayed down with a pesticide as you land in the islands. They want to make sure invasive species aren't coming over to the islands. There can be biting flies sometimes. The guides usually will let you know when that's going to be the case, and will say, wear long pants on this next excursion. There are biting flies here. But it doesn't hurt to bring repellent. I always say better to be over-prepared, so I usually bring some with me, but I am yet to use bug spray in the islands. And I'm someone that if there's a mosquito within a mile, they're going to find me. So it's usually not a big problem. The guides will prepare you when there are issues like the biting flies, but I always feel like it's best to be prepared. When you're hiking to a snorkeling spot, do you carry the wetsuit, wear the wetsuit, or what? In most cases, you're not going to be hiking to a snorkeling spot. In most cases, if it's split, you'll go ashore with the Zodiacs, you'll do your excursion, and then you'll go back to the boat to suit up. Or you'll have the bag that they provide you with the wetsuit, and you'll take the Zodiac to shore. You'll all just pile your bags on the beach with your wetsuits and your snorkel equipment in them. You'll go on your nature walk, and then you'll come back to the beach, suit up there, and go out snorkeling. So most people just wear like a swimsuit and a cover-up for the hike that day, or swimsuit and a t-shirt, and then you come back. The islands are all protected. No one's going to be touching your stuff except maybe some sea lions. So yeah, you're never like hiking carrying a wetsuit with you, so that's not a problem. Aside from air travel, what other fees are associated with the cruise and excluded from the price? Really good question. Obviously, your hotel stays and transfers and anything you choose to do in mainland Ecuador leading up to the cruise. There is a $100 national park fee that every guest pays when they land in the islands. It's currently $50 for children under the age of 12. And there is a $20, it's called your transit ticket or your tourist control ticket. And that transit card is essentially like your visa document for the islands. They scan it when you arrive in the islands. They scan it when you leave. It's their way of controlling and making sure they have the right number of people in the islands. And so that's something we arrange for you. And we talk you through all of that as you prepare for your trip. There are a lot more questions in here, but I know several of them are asking about safety again. So definitely I want to let Betty hop in on that again.
I have read some questions about the political situation in Ecuador. Yes, we had actual elections on Sunday, and the results were kind of interesting for everyone because it's somewhat more peaceful, because there's a lot of polarization in the country, but we look forward for a peaceful times. And October we have the second round, and things must improve with that. We're hoping for that, but at any rate, as I was telling you, tourism has all the protection, and the government is have a special protection in tourism areas, and we're here to help you as well.
We have seen definitely in past years where there's been, there's planned protests, or there are going to be some political issues that happens in every country. And I have never seen it handled better than what I have seen from Betty's team in Ecuador. I mean, they really have their ear to the ground. They know when streets are going to be blocked, when things are going to be happening. They're listening for demonstrations, and they are able to avoid those. So they'll say, hey, listen, we had you scheduled to do Cotopaxi today, a city tour tomorrow, and going up to the hot springs the next day. We're actually going to rearrange that, and we're going to take you in a different order to these things, because we know this road will be blocked on that day and that road will be blocked on that day. So they do a really good job of that. And I have to say, I've been pretty impressed too by the Ecuadorian government over the years, that they really know tourism is an important industry for their country. And so the tourist areas have been very protected. Knock on wood, we haven't had an incident with a tourist. And so they do take really good care of travelers.
Yes, Ecuador is a Nightland of Peace. So it is why when something happens, it's like a huge announcement everywhere. But hopefully it will calm down soon.
And then the last question I see that I don't think we covered at all is solo travelers. Definitely solo travelers are handled different ways by different ships. So some ships will, usually more towards the budget end of the spectrum, allow cabin sharing if you don't want to pay a single supplement. There are some, actually in the luxury ships, it's becoming more of a thing, that some of the ships now have some dedicated single cabins that are set up specifically for solo travelers without paying a single supplement. And then there are ships, obviously, that have double cabins that are available for solo use for a single supplement. Single supplements, I've seen them range anywhere from 25% to 100%. Most common is kind of 50 to 75%. So you're not paying the full price that two people would pay in a cabin, but you are paying more than just half of a cabin when you're traveling alone on a lot of the ships. So different ships handle it differently. We definitely help solo travelers. We learn their priorities, what they're trying to get as far as a cabin goes, and then we help them find the ships that are going to best accommodate that. So yes, some have single supplements, some don't. I see someone said they were on the Isabella too and didn't have a solo supplement. So yep, those ships definitely exist. It just depends. Also depends on specials they might be running. But we're here to help you find those options if you need them. So I think we are hitting our time limit right now, and I think we tackled most of the questions. Thank you guys. I know I can be a fast talker. And I apologize for the presentation at the beginning. Even with all the rehearsals in the world, tech gets the best of me sometimes. So I look forward to answering any other questions you have by email. You will get the recording of this later today. If you need help planning a trip, please, please, please reach out. We are excited to be here. We're excited to help you find the best trip for you. And I work as your matchmaker, get you that best itinerary all laid out. And then Betty's team and our detail specialists take over to help you get ready for the trip and make sure everything goes smoothly once you're there. So we've got a whole team in place, and you will be taken care of from call one until after your return home from your trip. So please do reach out, and thank you for hanging out with us today.